Theodore John Kaczynski passed away today.
Yes, he did.
I did not know this, also known as the Unabomber. I would be keen to hear your thoughts on how his views on technology and your views on evolutionary biology coincide, as his philosophy explored... Why did that happen? As his philosophy explored the jarring consequences of the Industrial Revolution, and Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century explored similar topics. What do you think of his philosophy? I did not read the manifesto. You did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was... He kind of did a quid pro quo, right? Like he got it published. He got it published in the New York Times.
Yeah, he actually succeeded in wielding terrorism to get his manuscript published. He actually injured a friend of mine, somebody I did not know at the time,
right?
David Glartner,
with one of his bombs.
With one of his bombs. Mm-hmm. Yes, he did. Let's put it this way. The manifesto actually raised some interesting eyebrows in the academy, right? It was not a totally dismissible concept, this content of the manifesto. Obviously, the manner by which it came to prevalence is completely indefensible. It was really uncareful. In other words, let's separate the Unabomber as a terrorist from the manifesto as a set of claims. And let's just look at the claims. It was, the thoughts were poorly developed. They were the thoughts of a person who had a glimpse of something and developed it in isolation, and therefore did not benefit from having careful readers critique and question and push back and all of the things that might happen in a rich intellectual environment.
He was a hermit.
Right? He was a hermit.
He exposed his ideas to no one until he exposed them to everyone.
Right.
But the ideas, while... so I'm going to have a very hard time answering with any precision because I don't... We talked about it some at the time. In fact, we had some conversations among other graduate students in seminars about some of it, as I remember. But it's been so long, and I just don't remember what what his actual positions are, what the claims are in the document. But I remember the sense being like, there's, he's no dummy, and he is insightful. And yes, if we can separate the Unabomber, the terrorist, from the man who chose to go off-grid in as many domains as possible and live entirely alone in order to escape what he saw as the creeping perniciousness of modernity, there's a lot of stuff that is true in what he was seeing. And yeah, that.
Well, I don't even want to say there was a lot of truth in it. I think there was a central realization, which ain't terribly far from the recognition in our book of hypernovelty, right? He saw civilization making people sick.
Yep.
And he didn't have any of the important pieces of the toolkit surrounding cultural evolution, altering our software, and us having a generalist platform. Right, that stuff wasn't there, and so he had an overly simplistic picture of what a human being is, and therefore what hypernovelty is. He, of course, didn't use that term, but
yep.
So anyway, it's kind of a what do you do with it? It's like, a student submits a paper, and there's something in it that's right, and the context in which it's presented is a misinterpretation of the evidence and all of that. So, it's a mixed bag. And when it comes from somebody who's blowing people up to make his point, it's easy enough to just say, well, it's not worth the cost of trying to disentangle it.
Yeah.
Let me say also that I did discover just now, there are two bizarre facts about this person that I believe are important to juxtapose with what we know of him as the Unabomber. One is that he was apparently part of an experiment that was either MK Ultra or downstream of an MK Ultra program.
American government experiment.
Yeah. Well, yes, at Harvard, he was apparently enrolled in an experiment that I just barely read about it, but some sort of psychological torture experiment.
Oh,
So,
and that was while he had a PhD in math or something.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So on the one hand, it could be nothing, but on the other hand, it very probably isn't nothing, right? Our government was experimenting with modifying people's psychology using things like hallucinogens for purposes that only it knows. And when a person does something remarkable, right, like becoming a mass murderer, or a multiple murderer, or whatever it is that we want to classify him as, and they have been in an experiment that plausibly alters psychology in a destructive way, I think we have to ask that question. And I can't believe it took me to this point, to his death, to discover that that was a feature of his story.
Yeah, that's crazy. I have no idea.
And on a possibly related note, the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, also apparently had severe body dysmorphia to the point of thinking that he wanted a sex change, which he ultimately decided against.
What?
Yeah, crazy. I know. So what is this? Is this a inherently psychologically unstable person?
How old was he? He died in prison, presumably.
Yep.
He was in his 70s?
That I don't know. But anyway, is this somebody whose psychology was destroyed by somebody's experiment? Is this somebody who was...
Do you know the timing of the body dysmorphia? Does it come after the psych experiment?
It's a good question. This is all new to me. Those two features of his story are new to me.
God.
But anyway, so there's just a question about how much... do you have some information, Zach?
No, not information. I have some say.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I would just have to point out that it's interesting if the U.S. government was experimenting with something that potentially caused a person to have body dysmorphia that long ago, and now everyone has body dysmorphia and wants sex changes. It's interesting. I obviously don't know any more than you do.
And you drive yourself crazy trying to figure out how to connect all the dots. But I think, first of all, it's not the only historical incident in which psychological experiments by our government is tangentially implicated. So
What do you mean? In what other kinds of things?
The murder of Bobby Kennedy Sr. is a bizarre story in which Sirhan,
yes.
the story doesn't make ballistic sense, right? It's not a match for the evidence. Evidence goes missing. There's something weird about the story that suggests that, although Sirhan was there, had a gun and fired it, that that's not the story of what happened to Bobby Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy
Sr. Yep. But there is also the strange fact of Sirhan's insistence that he didn't know what had happened anyway. So I'm not going to claim to know more about it than I do, but I will say, talk about breaches of informed consent, right? You've got a government experimenting with mind control for its own reasons, potentially causing what at best would be collateral damage and at worst would be, Manchurian Candidate kind of events. And who's to say what it means, but at some level, it's something we need to get to the bottom of.
We should go back and watch The Manchurian Candidate again. It may seem quaint.
It's hard to imagine, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.